and today, as you see in the title, I'm doing a little bit of a canning chat on siphoning and the All-American canner. A couple of my friends here on YouTube have done a couple chats on siphoning, and I thought I'd put what I think and the experiences that I've had over the years. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to bring you along and we'll do another siphoning chat. Okay, and in direct regards to the All-American. So I started out with with one and then two Presto canners, and they were little workhorses for me, and I was able to put two on the stove at a time. They're lighter weight than the All-American. And then when I purchased the All-American, I was like, oh, yeah, this is the Cadillac for me. Now, everybody's different. Maybe you prefer the Presto, that's okay. But I thought I would chat about siphoning. And part of the causes of siphoning are fluctuation in temperature, too fast, up or down. So bringing your canner up to speed slowly is key to canning. It's essential across the board, no matter what you're canning. So let's say, for instance, you're raw packing chicken and everything is cold. The jars, are cold. The chicken's cold. The canner should be cold. The water should be cold. So there's no shock to the jars, and it can come up to temperature gradually. When you're hot packing, like what I did with these potatoes, these potatoes are delicious, by the way. And I packed these with herbs and chicken broth, and it had a little tiny bit of siphoning, but not much. I mean, barely. You can barely see it's down below the line. I mean, so not even enough to show in the water. And then we have certain items like spinach and peppers that you will see as substantial, even though you know your headspace was correct and you debubbled, you'll still have a loss of headspace. Is it still okay? Absolutely. All the way down to half the liquid is totally fine, and that's from the USDA. So the headspace is always important. That allows expansion, and for pressure canning, it's always 1 inch of headspace. So that allows for expansion during the process, because when things are hot, they're expanded, and then as they cool down, they create that vacuum that seals your jar, but it also, things settle down, and some foods continue to absorb the liquid. So I believe, like in the spinach, for instance, you really have to be diligent about blanching it perfectly, and it's labor intensive. So you almost have to have 2 pots of water going at the same time. Get it blanched sufficiently, because vegetables have air in them. And I think Lisa over at Sutton's Days, when she did her chat, she talked about that. I don't remember if Mary Ellen at Prepper Potpourri, if she chatted about that or not, but vegetables have air in them. So a lot of our canning recipes that we can go by say you can raw pack or hot pack. Well, when you raw pack, you're going to lose space in the jar. You're also typically your headspace is going to go down because the air is released, and that lowers your water or whatever liquid you've got in there. I strive to get that perfect headspace and have everything covered in liquid, no matter what it is. But this spinach, no, I eat it right out of the jar. So, in fact, I need to do some more. So on the canner, when I bring this canner up to speed, whether it's hot pack or raw pack, I still bring it up pretty slowly. There's no rush in canning. And I know as a new canner, you might want to rush to get the stuff out of the canner. It's so exciting to pull your jars out and see it boiling in the jar, and how beautiful your product looks and all that. But honestly, you're rushing things. And I did that a little bit when I started canning again. And what I saw was some headspace issues. So then I started really being diligent, and you want to find that sweet spot on your stove. So you're going to bring this up to pressure. You're going to vent it without the weight, you're gonna vent out of the petcock for 10 full minutes. That's part of the timing process. And it also is acclimating those jars to having steam all the way around them. You're creating that steam pressure in the canner. Once you put that weight on, then you're gonna still bring it up slowly. Once it starts jiggling and giving you that, and you checked your gauge for your altitude, and that's super important that you follow the guidelines for your altitude on what pressure you're gonna be at, then you can start your timing and watch on it, make sure, but once you find that sweet spot on your stove, you can with confidence that you're not gonna have this thing get too hot or cool down on you and not, you know, if it cools down below the pressure that it should be, you really should start over. So when the canning process is done, I am not gonna touch this. I'm gonna let this come down. I'm not gonna move this either. I know a lot of people wanna move it to a burner, a cooler burner. I never do that. Only because you're rushing that. You're jostling the jars, you're probably letting more steam out because this might jiggle a little bit. You're putting it onto a cool burner, which is going to cool it down faster than it should. And these All-Americans, they are heavy, so they're going to take a while to cool down. Just be patient, go do something. Once your canner's turned off, it's cool to let it go. And I typically, even once I see this is on 0, I'll still wait another 5 or 10 minutes before I even take the weight. Because sometimes you'll have there's still a little bit of steam in the canner. As long as it's not excessive, you know, then I go ahead and I take the weight off. And then I'm going to leave it another 5 or 10 minutes, right? Because those jars are still screaming hot. And out here, it's not that temperature. It's not, you know, let's see, what is 0 on here? Because the lowest, okay, so you're looking at 75 degrees when it's down on 0. That's still very warm. That's what the gauge is saying. So then once I feel comfortable about getting my jars out, I will then take my lid and have a gap. So I've got a gap in here and it's letting some steam out, but it's still holding the heat in. And I'll let it sit like that for 10 or 15 minutes because I know I'm doing myself a favor. I'm letting that all cool down, and because what happens if you do take everything off too soon or you let off pressure, everything in the jar wants to escape. And because you're doing finger tight with your ring, there's room for it to escape, right? Until it creates that vacuum. So then I take my lid off and I'll even let it sit like that sometimes, depending on how long I've let it sit like the other way. But I'll typically let it sit like this open for a while. Now, if I've got double stacked jars and some of them are tattlers, then I will go ahead and take them out and tighten my lids. I always, you know, it's typical to look in your water that's left in the canner. It starts with 3 inches of water and it'll go down. You usually still have an inch or inch and a half of water. And I will look and see if there's any liquid in there. And if you've got color or liquid that you know is not clear water, then you've had some siphoning. Sometimes you'll have one jar out of a whole batch that siphons, and I don't know why. Either it didn't heat up at the same rate. I don't know. You know, we're not inside there, but as long as you know you're doing safe canning, if you do lose excessive headspace, it's still okay as long as you're not losing all of it. Like dry canning, I think Lisa mentioned potatoes. There was a trend of rebel canning going around where they're canning potatoes with no liquid inside the jar. Extremely dangerous. I mean, you're dealing with botulism, the possibility of it. Not everything has botulism, but all vegetables, meats, anything has the capability to carry botulism spores. And they just wait for the right environment to actually grow and unleash their terrible, you can get terribly sick. And so it's very important that we can safely. If you follow the USDA guidelines, you're pretty safe. Now, can we do our own recipes as long as you're following the guidelines for each and every ingredient, how long it should be canned for? Absolutely. So I found tomato products want to, oh, and I'm gonna go back to the potato thing. So the reason dry canning potatoes is a bad idea, or canning things that are too dense, liquid is the catalyst to heat everything in the jar all the way to the center of the jar to the appropriate temperature for the appropriate amount of time. And our cool down period is included in that timing. In fact, while it's cooling down, it's still holding that really extreme temperature inside the jar that is making it safe for us to eat. So home preserving, it's not just a hobby. It's a science. There's a science behind it, and it should be taken very seriously. Now, like, okay, tomato products, for whatever reason, they heat up fast on the stove. They heat up quickly in the microwave. I don't know what it is, but tomatoes want to siphon tomato sauces, that kind of thing. I never have an issue with siphoning with water bath canning, but once in a while with a pressure canning, you might get it. I don't feel I've ever had excessive or siphoning per se when I've done meat that I raw packed that I added liquid to. And so I'm going to bring over a couple jars. Hold on. Okay, so I grabbed a couple jars off my hutch. These are stewed tomatoes that I did 2019 out of the garden. And you can see one kept its headspace pretty accurate, and this one lost a little bit. Same exact canning session, and one of them did just fantastic, and this one lost a little bit. It's still safe. So same with chicken. Okay, so this is chicken that I canned in 2021 in May, and I raw packed it, and I added liquid to the chicken broth to this jar. So the meat is completely covered. You see there's a little layer of fat on top, which is totally okay. This might have been thighs too. And it's got that delicious broth in there. The chicken itself creates broth, but so does the broth that you add. And even if you get some siphoning, I've never had a jar not seal because oil or grease came out of the jar. And I mean, I picked up jars that obviously, because we always wash our jars, but it was obviously very icky and greasy, and and you wash them and the jars stay sealed, so no problem. These jars are still as tightly sealed as they can be. This is absolutely wonderful tomato, stewed tomatoes, and I love having all this on my shelf, especially right now. But so as far as siphoning goes, we're all going to have it. It doesn't matter how experienced or how inexperienced we are. Don't be scared, and just do your due diligence to find that spot on your stove and be patient, and you will reap the rewards for years to come from each canning session. So guys, I truly hope that this inspires you. If you have any questions, any other questions, I do get a lot of questions about canning and about preserving food and what's okay and what's not okay. And we really should be using our own judgment. Don't listen to just someone on YouTube. Go to the USDA website for National Home Food Preservation, and you can download a copy of that, their canning book, for free. You can download it for free. You can order a copy of it, but you've got a wealth of information available to you. I refer to my canning books all the time. I'll be canning tomorrow in this bad boy. I'm going to be doing asparagus in 1.5 pint jars, because I have 1 jar left in the pantry, so I want to restock my pantry with asparagus, and I will bring you along, and I'm going to bring you along for the whole thing. I hope that you'll you'll go ahead and give me a thumbs up, leave me a comment down below. If you're not a subscriber, I hope you subscribe and you get something out of this. Siphoning is going to happen to everybody. but I feel like the All-American is going to have a little bit less if you're patient. They don't cool down quite as fast, and I think that really helps. I don't know. I'm not saying they're going to have less than a Presto, but you've got a good unit here if you want to use it, or Presto. I would use a Presto in a heartbeat. But again, I'd still practice those same things. And then never leave your jars in because you think, oh, if leaving it in the canner is better. You don't want to leave it in there for hours, because then it can create what's called flat sour. And that is where the product sits in a warmish state for too long, and it's not able to cool down properly, and that temperature at some point. Now, it doesn't make it inedible, but it does give it a sour taste, and I've never had that happen, thankfully, but I have seen people that leave stuff in the canner overnight. They leave the lid on and leave it in there overnight, and I'm pretty sure they probably had flat sour out of the deal in the end. Anyway, all right, guys, I can't wait to see you next time. I can't wait to see the comments down below, and as always, let's do some canning. Happy canning. And here's to very little. Oh, one more thing. Okay, so when these guys come out of the canner and they're boiling in the jar, even when they're still in the canner, when your lids are still fluctuating and releasing air because it's expanded, they're also releasing steam, which is part of what's inside that jar. So it can release too much steam if it cools down too fastly, and that is also headspace. Doesn't mean you're necessarily going to see it in the water. It can evaporate. The water can evaporate into the atmosphere. So there you go. That's my take on siphoning, and I hope it helps. I hope that I didn't go on and on and on too much, but anyway, I wanted to touch base for you guys. All right.